You are listening to the 2 and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
I'm Travis Currah. He is Sheldon Jones, coming out of week 18 of the 2024 CFL season. I got the week right off the hop, so that is a plus for this episode of the show. Before we go any further, I just want to talk about Saturday at Commonwealth Stadium. They really are building something special outside of those Elks games and the fan park and the tailgate they have going on, and just the grassroots movement of all the fans that are there. And they had this chili cook-off, and man, I was lucky enough to be a judge for the event. I took it a little too seriously, I think. It was kind of like I was on an episode of Chopped, and it was funny because I would go up to, a chef, and I'd say, so what was your process? Now, every cook treats it different. Some say, well, what are you talking about? I just throw stuff in a pot. And this other guy's like, oh, I smoked this chuck roast for 4 hours. I smoked the onions separate, the poblano peppers separate. Then they come all together and they sit in the pot for 3 days. And chili's serious business, dude. And
I can imagine.
One guy, he had a pairing of bourbon that went with the chili. There was actually bourbon in the chili, and I don't know, there was some incredible work out there. I was so glad to be able to judge the 13 different kinds of chili. My guts did okay. They handled the chili, although I think throughout the day you start to kind of get conditioned to the spice, right? And there wasn't any crazy peppers, like even a habanero or a scorpion pepper or anything like that. But there were peppers and chilies, legit chilies. These guys put work into these things. And the one guy, it was probably the most spicy one. I really enjoyed it. To me, it was spice, but it wasn't, I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to struggle through this. I made the mistake of offering it to my wife, and it was the spiciest thing she has eaten in her life. Up to that point, we had no water, we had no milk, we had no ice.
Oh, no.
The panic in her eyes was unlike anything I've ever seen, but hey, that was the fun of the tailgate. And so the winner, they had like over 350 fan votes. Like, fans are going around trying them and putting the votes in with the people at the Elks call, Scout and Catherine. They put this whole thing together, and their show on Wednesday, they're going to announce the winners. It was all presented by You Need a Barbecue in Sherwood Park, Edmonton Sports Talk, also the Turf District, our friends there. There wasn't a bad chili, but the hard part is differentiating and ranking all 13 of them. It's a tough job. Somebody's got to do it, and props to the good fans in Edmonton for creating something special. It was lots of fun, man, and Sheldon, we're going to have to get you out there for next year's chili cook-off.
Yes, this whole weekend I'm like, I want that chili. I did talk to my mom, and so hopefully, she said she'd make it, but I got to go buy everything. That kind of sucks. But,
oh, no. What's the point?
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. We'll get it happening, though.
Nice. Yeah. So, yeah, there's only one more game left in Edmonton this season. The tailgate's always a good time. Good people, good fans. I ran into the official hairdresser of the CFL family. Marsha made the trip. Annie made the trip. Ran into a fan of the show, Greg. He lives in Edmonton. He's a Rider fan. Introduced himself to me. Brent, if you've ever been to a Grey Cup and you go to the Spirit of Edmonton and see this Rider fan with this handlebar mustache and this crazy hat and face painted, what a great time in Edmonton at the game. But week 18 started in the Hammer, and it was must win for the Ticats. Two of the hottest teams in the CFL. And, well, Hamilton's hot streak came to an end. Winnipeg winning by 3 scores, 31-10. Winnipeg ended Edmonton's hot streak. Well, they ended another one here, Sheldon, on Friday night.
Yeah, it seemed like I think Hamilton had a chance. I think just there was some missteps. We had a revisiting of the early season of Tim White with his not being able to catch the ball. Yeah, it just seemed, even the overalls couldn't get it done this week. Props to the Bombers social media team for their tweet with the ratty tatty overalls for that game. That was pretty funny. But yeah, it just all good things have to come to an end, and I think it was definitely a long shot coming into it to see if the Hamilton was going to be able to make it, but at least for the fans in Hamilton, they have been able to kind of see some wins at the end and see some promise, because we're in next year country now for them and for a couple other teams in the CFL. So a few weeks left in the season to see what we can put together for next season.
It's going to be interesting to see, the decisions being made in Hamilton going forward. Chris Jones going to be the full-time DC? Is Bo Levi Mitchell going to be in town after this year? I'm going to say probably not on the second one, just with how the season had gone up until this point. But, does it feel like Winnipeg is back to you? It feels like if you're going to keep up with them, obviously you need to find a way to get your defense off the field, because once Winnipeg starts chugging up the clock and those tough yards on your defense, it's really hard to win, man. They had the ball for 38 minutes in this one. And when Hamilton is committing the mistakes that they had been and haven't been over their recent hot spell, 7 penalties, 107 yards for Hamilton, dropped passes. Winnipeg only had 4 penalties for 35 yards. So here's the deal. If you're going to be making those kinds of mistakes, especially early in the game, I do feel like that drop, it took the wind out of Hamilton's sails, because Winnipeg got up, that beautiful touchdown catch by Clarcius, the rookie for the Bombers. And then Hamilton answered back. They had that 18-yard touchdown from James Butler. He was really untouched for that one. Winnipeg comes back. They have a nice little drive, and they end up getting a field goal there. And I think it was the next drive, or one of the next drives, where Bo... He had a great deep pass. This was early in the second quarter. Tim White, it was on the 10-yard line. He would have just walked into the end zone. They would have put the Ticats in the lead, 13-10, 14-10, if they ended up being able to get the extra point there. And then after that, it felt like the Ticat offense couldn't really get going. And I don't know if Bo was back to feeling unsure of himself, but a few of those interceptions that he threw, one of them, it looked like the receiver fell. I think the one that Tyrell Ford got, but the one that Diedrich Nichols got, I don't know what Bo was seeing or not seeing on that play, and that's not what we've seen from him over the past, month and a half or so.
Yeah, he's been so dialed in, so it is kind of uncharacteristic here. But I think Winnipeg is just back to being that team where you need to be perfect against them if you're going to win. You need to be able to take advantage of any opportunities that they give you. And Bo and Hamilton and Tim White and everyone else just weren't able to do that. And you're not going to win against this Winnipeg team if you can't capitalize.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. But Hamilton goes into the break, halftime. They're only down 7. So there was a chance there. But it was about halfway through the second quarter. Winnipeg gets a drive, and that's when they started, leaning on the Cats a little bit. 9 plays, 72 yards, 6 minutes off the clock. And then that's when they went up by 2 scores. And then at that point, James Butler is taken out of the game by the Ticats. And then the Bomber D-line, even though Hamilton's got strong offensive line, they've been able to protect the quarterback over the last little while. Once Winnipeg's able to pin the ears back, you're in deep trouble, and that goes for most D lines in the CFL. If they're not guessing what you're doing, you're gonna have a really hard time coming back in this one. And Winnipeg, they totally took advantage of forcing Hamilton into a corner.
Yeah, and it's the perfect time of the year for them to finally be able to, figure out how to get Brady Oliveira more touches and get him inside into the end zone. I guess it's not a real secret as to why he's able to score now when Chris Drevler was getting all those short touchdowns earlier in the season. But now is the time in the CFL season where you need to be able to pound that ball to, chew the clock in the second half when you have a lead. And Winnipeg, they're the best team in the league to do that right now.
There was a play in the second half where Bo, he looked for Stephen Dunbar Jr. The play was broken up by Diedrich Nichols. The play ended up getting challenged. And I know we talk about this all the time, but to me, I'm sitting on the couch. Diedrich Nichols clearly had his arm on the waist of the receiver. Yep. And it doesn't get called. So I really think just maybe this is a thing that's going to be addressed in the offseason again. Because, what's the point of a challenge? If it's not so egregious that you're not going to overturn it on a challenge, then what's really even the point? Do you know what I mean? Because if you can only challenge something that's so clear and obvious, there's a good chance that the refs are going to catch it the first time anyway. So I'm struggling with the point of a challenge flag at this point for a coach. Because if I'm one, I'm not confident of throwing that darn thing anyway. I'd probably save it to the last minute of the game and just have a Hail Mary challenge. I don't blame coaches for doing that.
Yeah, to me, it's clear and obvious if you have your arm on the receiver before the ball gets there, that's pass interference. That's the letter of the law when it comes to it. So I don't know how that didn't get overturned. And you're right. It's just become like a crapshoot whether the command center is going to make the right call, make the wrong call. And we're going to talk about it in the later game, but then it's making the players get upset and speaking out about it, and it's just not a good look on the league because we want there to be continuity. We want there to have these calls make sense so you can justify why or why not it's overturned or it stands, and hopefully they do have. And I don't know if it needs to be overhauled. I just think it needs to be re-explained, and I think we need to start again at a base level, and just so that it's not changing halfway through a season or a quarter through the season because there's a stupid call. We just have to have cut and dry. This is what our review system is. This is how it's going to be used going forward. Yeah,
and I guess that's part of my issue too. If something's going to be a penalty in week 2, it should probably be a penalty in week 18. I understand that once the playoffs come, and this goes for any league, they let more and more things go, and they let the players decide it more than the calls, and that's a fair thing too. I just say if they're going to have a challenge flag, well, then let's call it properly.
Yeah.
Brady Oliveira, 24 carries, 147 yards, and a touchdown in this one. He's now completely on a roll. He's running downhill over teams, and nobody is going to want to get in his way. Now, I guess there's an outside chance that the Riders, they need to win out, and Winnipeg needs to lose out to host the West Final, right? So I don't know. That seems quite unlikely. It could happen. But with the West going through Winnipeg again, to me, it feels like a foregone conclusion that it's going to be Winnipeg in the Grey Cup. But hey, you got to play the games. I guess, and there's still several games to play. The leading receiver for the Bombers was Kenny the King Lawler, 3 catches, 78 yards, but it was the rookie Clarcius that did get the touchdown in the first half. Zach Collaros, 13 of 19, 201 yards and a touchdown, but it got the job done. For the Ticats, Bogos, 15 of 28, 2 picks, 217 yards. Their leading receiver was Brendan O'Leary Orange, the former Bomber, who had a 71-yard play where he looked like an absolute monster on that play, but not enough to get the win for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Diedrich Nichols did have 2 knockdowns. He did have 2 tackles for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Reddick Cramdy had a couple knockdowns as well. And then, hey, you always got to look out for Willie Jefferson. He's not really on the stat sheet too much here, but he did have a fumble recovery. That was a big one, and he's certainly looking more and more disruptive out there. No matter how slow the start of the season was in June, now is when the games are harder to win, and it does seem like it is the Winnipeg of old, my friend, even if we don't want to admit it, and 8 other teams are quite annoyed by it. We gotta learn to live with it, because to beat the man, to be the man, you gotta beat the man, right?
Woo! Yeah. They deserve full marks. Their coaching staff has again shown why they are so good, and the players are showing why they're so good too. It just was such an uncharacteristically poor start, which maybe we can blame on the lack of playing time for the starters in the preseason, but let's hope for Winnipeg's sake that they learn their lesson there and they don't rest too many starters going on. Like I'm sure they want to clinch first. So if they can win in this first game coming up here, they still have 2 games after that. So we'll have to see if kind of they learn their lesson to, not have their star players sit for too long to get rusty, and, could affect them come the West Final.
Although, you know what, that probably makes them, basically playing with pressure for more of the season might be good for your team come playoffs. Like if you cruise through the season and you won 15 or 16 games, sorry, Toronto fans, and then the East Final rolls around and you get everything falling apart all at once, and then it's something you haven't experienced in a while, and all of a sudden another team's playing for the Grey Cup and they win it. So Winnipeg, they've been playing playoff football for a little while here, and maybe if nobody's hurt or too hurt, that'll serve them well once the playoffs get underway. The second half of the doubleheader was the Gravy Bowl in Vancouver, as the BC Lions beat the Calgary Stampeders, essentially ending their playoff hopes. 32-15 was the final score here. The game was really a grinding game until the Stampeders completely collapsed in the fourth quarter. Like, really, there wasn't much going on in the game until the fourth quarter. It was 7-6 at halftime in this one. Now, of course, Calgary had some fight left. They do have some strong coaches. I still think Dave Dickinson's a strong coach, and I know that Stamps fans are probably going to disagree with that at this point. But I think he is a good coach. Maybe he's wearing too many hats now, and that's part of it. But they came into this game giving BC some trouble. They really did. But what does that say about BC? Like, this is crazy. At the beginning of the year, they looked great. It looked like they were going to be the ones that were going to control the West and cruise to the Grey Cup. Maybe they had the MOP candidate in Vernon Adams Jr. behind center. Now, they just kind of look average to me.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you can really blame it on Nathan Rourke, because like they were already kind of in that slump when they brought him back, and it's just it is weird. It's like the opposite of Winnipeg. They started out super strong and then kind of crashed down to reality. Like I still think that there was a lot of fans, us included, that were thinking that they were probably going to finish second in the West at the beginning of the season, but it just seems like they kind of exceeded expectations at the beginning, and then I don't know if they got too cocky or full of themselves or what, because I think they're well coached. They obviously have good players. I know they've been having struggles with defense, but it just kind of seems like they've started to play down to the level of some of their opponents, and they need to figure it out, because they're next week against Saskatchewan. Basically, whoever wins that game is probably going to get second place, and if they lose that game, then they have to go on the road 2 times to try to make it back to play a Grey Cup in their hometown, and that's daunting.
Yeah, I don't have the stats in front of me, but to win on the road twice before the Grey Cup, that's a tough one. And then to go on to win. Now, sometimes the stats don't favor the home team in the division final, because a team that can, win the semifinal, a lot of times they can go into that game with a lot of momentum. But to win both of them on the road, that's a tall task. And that's part of the reason, of course, why there's never been a West team that has crossed over to the East, even though they've been able to win the semifinal to go to the division final. That's a tough thing to win and go to the Grey Cup. One of the critical mistakes I thought that Calgary made, and this one, it did lead to BC's first points on the board, but Calgary was moving the ball, and they were having a drive where they were really wearing out the BC defense. And it started on the BC 37-yard line. Mayer completes the pass to Ishmael Hyman, and then he fumbles the ball. The Lions do return it 54 yards. They couldn't do anything with it, but they did put a field goal on the board. Man, when they had 12 plays, they killed almost 8 minutes off the clock, and the drive ends in a fumble. That is so deflating to your team. Like, what a critical mistake to make anytime in a football game.
Yeah, but especially on the road, because it just got the crowd right back into it after the crowd's been sitting on their hands for 8 minutes because they've just been getting, run over. So yeah, that huge. It's not often the TSN turning points are, in the first quarter, but yeah, you're right. That's certainly when kind of the game kind of seemed to drift away from the Stampeders after a decent start.
And then everything just fell apart in the fourth. It was just bang, bang, bang. The Lions, they were only up 12-8. But then Jake Mayer gets picked off by Matthew Betts. And man, you saw the motor he turned on to take that one to the house. All of a sudden, the Lions are up 18-8. And then the very next drive, Jake Mayer, there was a fumbled snap. TJ Lee ends up returning that one to the house. No, it got reviewed. They called it incomplete pass. Am I seeing this? No, that one ended up being the touchdown. There was a review on the play, but TJ Lee takes that to the house, and yeah.
Yeah, if I recall, it was a pretty bang play. It was not, which this is another thing that the command center.
I think it was slightly forward, but
yeah,
I don't know if they had the right angle, really, that was right in line with the play. So now I remember that TJ Lee was kind of in between Mayer and the receiver, and it was a lateral that he ended up batting down and taking to the house. But yeah, that's what happened.
Right. I was thinking of a different play. There was a different play somewhere else that was pretty reminiscent of a fumble that the
Oh,
Riders scored the week before. It was reviewed. It didn't stand,
yeah.
but then this one stood. So it was kind of strange on that part. Yeah, like that's just another like when you give up two defensive scores back to back like that,
Oh,
like just go home. Finish the game. Just tell the refs, we're done. Like it's just you can't recover from that.
and then the next possession, Jake Maier gets intercepted again by Adrian Green. So BC ends up
Really?
putting 3 more points on the board for that one. Like the fourth quarter, they just completely fell apart. 3 drives in a row with a turnover, 2 ending in touchdowns. The BC offense didn't have to do anything. Like,
Yeah, Nathan Rourke was my captain, and I only got 20 points with the double score. Like
23-7, the Lions outscored the Stampeders in the fourth quarter. That sums up the Calgary season. And we're gonna look and see what kind of changes they're gonna be. This might be Jake Maier's last start as a Calgary Stampeder. What's going to happen for him going forward? I kind of wonder how things would have gone for this team if Matthew Shiltz was healthy earlier in the year. Would they have made a switch to him, at least in some games, or given him some starts during the summer? He comes in here, and I get it. It was late in the game, and he goes 4 for 5, 99 yards, and a touchdown. I think he had a 53-yard touchdown to Reggie Bagleton. But I wonder if he was healthy for portions of this season, if we would have been seeing a lot more of Matthew Shiltz.
well, yeah, because I'm pretty sure that's why Maier has played as much, because Dave wasn't comfortable going to Bonner. Obviously, I guess it got enough was enough, and he had to kind of start him the one game. But you're right, and I thought that Schultz actually was a sneaky good signing by Calgary, because I think he's the kind of guy who I think does have a future in the league, and not just as a short yardage quarterback. Like he can do that, but as he's shown, he also does have an arm, and he can complete those passes. And I know it was garbage time, and I know it was against a prevent defense, but still, you can only go up against what you're going up against. But I think we're definitely going to see him start at least, a couple of these 3 games. I'm sure they might give Bonner another start to see, because now that's all they can do, because they're missing the playoffs. For the first time in 20 years.
I don't know if I've seen a smile from you like that.
What a shame. What a shame.
So now your
Sorry, Darren. Sorry, buddy.
Your early season power rankings of the Calgary Stampeders, you dealt with so much heat. This is probably a little bit of vindication for you, man.
That's right. Let's do the DIY, clapping our hands, patting our backs. What can I say? Broken clock, though. Broken clock. Let's not get too crazy. I'm on a streak, hey? I went from being a terrible, biased co-host to turn it up. Best CFL pod. Shout out.
I gotta pull this
Shout out for that comment, because that was awesome.
I'll try to bring it up later in the show. I think it's one of the most legendary moments of this season. But for the Calgary Stampeders, Reggie Bagleton was the leading receiver, big part to that 53-yard touchdown. I thought that William Stanback was going to have a big game for the Lions. They couldn't really get him going. He only had 3.3 yards per carry, 50 yards rushing on 15 carries. So the Stamps were able to keep him under control. Keon Hatcher, 4 catches, 97 yards. He was the leading receiver for the BC Lions. And hopefully Cam Eccles is okay. There was a collision on the sideline there. It was a special teams play. I think it was a punt return, or it was a kickoff return. It was a return anyway. And Eccles, he ends up getting hit, and they do cart him off the field. I actually thought it didn't look like he got smashed in the head. Like, the helmets were close, but it didn't look like a headshot, or leading with the helmet. But it's a violent sport, man, and I really I don't want to be selfish, but it does make me worry for the future of special teams. I mean, if it's the play and if it's the phase of the game where the most players are getting hurt, there probably is going to be some changes on that front.
Yeah, I just hope that they can find a way to make it as close to what they have in the NFL, I guess, but still having returns, because it's still 9 times out of 10 a touchback in the NFL this season, and that's just not exciting. So I'm all for player safety, but I'm not for taking away something that is exciting and unique and just a part of the game. Just, again, this sounds terrible, but just because there's an injury every 2 or 3 times a season, again, that's me. That's crappy for me to say. I get it, but football is a violent sport, as you said. They know what they sign up for. I don't want players getting hurt, but sometimes even in flag football, there's injuries. Okay, you can't take away injuries just by making rules and changing rules. So I hope that they can figure out a way that we can retain the excitement of kickoffs and returns.
Yeah, I agree there. A lot of times there are injuries where, the guy steps wrong and, out goes his Achilles kind of thing like that. And that's not going to go away. I agree there. But man, we saw it in the playoffs last year. I think it was the Calgary BEC game, that collision on special teams. And it's science when guys are running full speed at each other, that it happens, unfortunately. But we want the guys to be as safe as possible playing this game that we love. The Calgary Stampeders are out of the playoffs, and joining them, Sheldon, will be the Edmonton Elks. No Alberta teams for the first time in the playoffs since the Calgary Stampeders joined the CFL in the 40s. So this is uncharted territory, my friend, as the Elks lost 28-24 to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. But it's not to say that they did not put up a fight, those Edmonton Elks.
They did, and it just, it often seemed like the Riders were fumbling the game away or trying not to win, in my opinion. But the Elks aren't a bad team. They just have had some tough breaks. They've had some coaching inadequacies, I would say. I think they've had some interim coaches and GMs kind of succeed early, but maybe, as they're learning on the fly, maybe not making some of the right decisions. There's been some player personnel issues that have been affecting them. A rough break, because I think after what Trey Ford was able to do last season, I think there's a lot of Elks fans who had a lot of optimism to see what he would be able to do this season. And then, Chris Jones signed McLeod Bethel-Thompson and kind of changed everything there. But, I think for them to be able to come back from how they started is really good. And I think they deserve props for that. And, they fought hard. They were in it right till the end in this game too, with their playing on the line. So kudos to them. And then hopefully next year it's better.
The momentum, it was shifting in every direction in this game. In the first half, Trevor Harris gets picked off near the end of the first quarter by Cordell Jackson. And then the Elks end up capitalizing on that. And they take that to the house. They had to work on it. 12 plays, 83 yards. It took 7 minutes off the clock, but the Elks getting a touchdown there. Javon Leake gets the rushing touchdown, and there was some nastiness after the play. CJ Revis ends up getting his helmet torn off. I think he did throw a punch in that one, but didn't get ejected. Normally, as soon as you see a swing, the guy's out of the game, but also it looked like he had his helmet torn off, so I guess the refs were okay with the retaliation. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of frustrating for fans, because I'm sure there's lots of Elk fans who are like, why isn't he getting tossed? And I'm sure there's a lot of Rider fans who are like, oh, thank God he didn't get tossed. But we just need, if that's the rule, if you throw a punch, then that needs to be followed. But again, in the heat of the moment, I can completely understand why a player would be upset getting his helmet ripped off of his face. So well, it's hard for me to say, don't throw a punch, buddy. But
yeah, I know. And there were a couple odd moments in this game where there was an offsetting. So there's an offside that Edmonton takes. And on the same play, Saskatchewan takes a holding. Now, I don't know if they held the guy that went offside, but the rule says that even though a holding penalty is 5 yards longer, I guess they just offset and they just redo the play. But to me, the offside is the original penalty. So why? I guess you're supposed to just leave the guy go and hope he doesn't hit your quarterback, and hopefully they blow the play dead, and then you can gain the 5 yards there. But wasn't there there was an offsetting pass interference and another call like later in the game? There was some weird things going on in this one.
Yeah, but according to Article 3, Paragraph C, that's how it's called in the rule book. It's weird because that's a gamble. Like you can think that you saw a flag, or you can think that somebody's offside, but what if they're not? And what if you let it go and then the guy just destroys the quarterback? So, it's kind of strange. I wish there'd be a little bit more of an explanation instead of just they offset, because to the general CFL fan like you and I think we're, not to toot our own horns, but I think we're a little bit above the general fan. When we know a holding penalty is 10 yards and an offside penalty is 5 yards, there's no way that they should offset. However,
there were some diehard, season ticket holders in my section. They were like, what? That doesn't make sense. But yeah.
But apparently it is in the rule book, as it was pointed out to us. Mm-hmm. And, I guess that's just the way she goes. But it's again something else for us that we're talking about officiating when we really shouldn't be.
Well, yeah, when it's, that's by I actually am, and I want to give props to the refs because there's so much to know. Like something like that. I couldn't have told.
Well, and I'm sure that they have someone in their ear, like telling them, right, like who's got the rule book in front of them. But it's I don't envy them, and props to Andre, because it was an Andre game. We love Andre.
There was some crazy stuff going on late. I do not envy them either. We're counting Canadians. We are counting snaps. Like it's wild. Now, after the Leak touchdown and the Elks take the lead, and what does Trevor Harris do after throwing an interception but hit Sam Emelis for an 88-yard touchdown and tie the game up after a successful 2-point conversion? So then the Elks' next drive, they couldn't get anything done. And then Mario Alford ends up returning the punt for 40 yards. It was a big return. So then it looked like, Saskatchewan's got all the momentum. What happens? Back-to-back sacks. That drive went nowhere. So the Elks get the ball. And what happens? Dylan Mitchell catches a 38-yard touchdown, and the Elks are in the lead. So that first half, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on, momentum shifting, and it was at that point when I really thought, these Elks might go off to the races. Well, the next drive, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, 75 yards in 7 plays, and they tie the game up with about a minute left in the first half. There was lots going on in this game, man.
Yeah, and it was just, as a Rider fan, it was just exciting to be able to see them put the ball in the end zone. Yes, they had their struggles with some interceptions and some sacks, but once they marched the field and once they got close to that green zone, they were converting. They weren't just, leaving it up to Brett Lowther to come in and get 3 points. So that was exciting for me. But I always love games that go shot for shot, mistake for mistake. It's exciting for us fans. It keeps us in it because honestly, last week I turned off the Winnipeg and Edmonton game just because it got out of hand so early. And so I don't ever really want that to happen in my CFL games. So it was good. Very good. And
then, and this was a critical mistake by the Elks, where 30 seconds left in the first half, Adam O'Clair picks off McLeod Bethel-Thompson. So the Riders get the momentum back, and they end the half with a 50-yard field goal. So they're up 3 going into halftime. There was a lot going on in that second quarter. And what happens at the start of the third quarter? McLeod Bethel-Thompson's intercepted by Roland Milligan Jr. Dude, M-O-E. I think the case is getting stronger. I'm starting to see it.
Well, they're actually starting to talk about it too. Suitors saying it. So, if he can keep it up, if he can get another couple picks here in it's uncanny. There's never been a player to ever lead the league in special teams tackles and then another major statistic.
Interceptions, right?
Yeah, he leads 2 major statistics as well as the most special teams. Most knockdowns. That means he has more knockdowns than Willie Jefferson. More interceptions. That means he has more interceptions than anyone else. And he is the most special. So he's playing 3/4 of the snaps in that game. He's on special teams. He's making them play or making plays. This isn't Rider bias, guys. Roland Milligan is playing an outstanding season, and it's the most outstanding. And also, big Gino Lewis got quite the helper on that O'Clair pick. I didn't want to interrupt you, but if he would have just let that ball go down, if he would have just let that ball hit the turf, different story there.
He did get the assist. You are correct, but that possession after the interception ended in a field goal, and it was redemption for Gino Lewis because quite the touchdown pass he made in the third quarter, which ended up making it a tie game because Boris Beatty's kick attempt ended up going doink off of the upright. So we're in the third quarter and it is 21-21 at that point. The Elks had a couple beauty touchdown catches, one from Gino, one from Dylan Mitchell. I thought maybe Marcus Sales poorly timed the jump, but Mitchell, the bigger guy, just took the ball away and ended up making that one a touchdown pass. Well, the next drive, Trevor Harris hits Keyshawn Johnson for a touchdown to put the Riders up 28-21. This was a pretty entertaining game on this one. Then the fourth quarter does get a little bit interesting. Now, I don't know exactly where in this game it happened, but there was an Elks challenge that they couldn't challenge, and they ended up taking the challenge away. And then there was a moment that was about 6 minutes left. It's 2nd and 4 at the Saskatchewan 29. McLeod Bethel-Thompson hits Javon Leake. They marked him down at the 1, and then things get reviewed here, and McLeod Bethel-Thompson not happy about this after the game. Now keep in mind that McLeod Bethel-Thompson has already been fined twice this year. So he says, a questionable call in my opinion on the goal line where they reviewed a scoring play, but it's not a scoring play. He said that to me is a ridiculous call. It wasn't a scoring play, so I don't know how you review it. We were on the ball, ready to go. Saskatchewan should have had to challenge it to get it overturned. He goes, that just seems bogus. Now, the way I understand it, Sheldon, is that they review potential scoring plays. He was pretty close to the goal line, but I was in the stands. How did you see the play? I only had the big screen. It looked like, well, he dropped it and got it back, and they ruled that the ground helped him make the catch. It was a close one, man. It kind of looked like he did make the catch again. That's me from the stands.
I think it was close, but I think they did get the right call, just because it seemed like the ball was still kind of moving right when he did get close. Like, it looked like he secured it right as the ball kind of touched the ground, if I recall correctly, and then just him kind of trapping it there. So I understand why the call was reversed, because you didn't have to go super slow-mo to see that, because you could see it kind of at live speed. It's just when you did slow it down super slow-mo, you did see the ball kind of get trapped. So, but it's a potential play, because you have to see, like, what if they didn't quite touch him until he rolled into the end zone? So it's still a potential play. So on one hand, I kind of understand how it was not called on the field a scoring play. So I can understand why McLeod is a little bit pissed off with that, but he must not understand that if it's a potential scoring play, that they do have the right to call down for that too. And let's be honest, they've called down for completely different times, and they've done whatever they've wanted to do. So if the call was egregiously wrong, I could understand him being upset and calling it out. But in my opinion, and in the opinion of the command center, it was the right call. So I don't know why he's choosing this to be the hill to die on, I guess.
I'm having some memories come back from this game. Was there a moment in the game where a player got hit right after catching it and they called it incomplete? That seems to be a trend over the past few weeks. There was also a near interception by the Elks in the end zone, but the player ended up dropping the ball. I know some fans in my section wanted it reviewed, but to me, well, I think that they celebrated the interception before watching the guy go down. You know what I mean? Yeah. And hey, it's an emotional game. But the opportunities didn't end from the Elks after that Javon Leake review, because on the next drive, Lucius Purifoy picks off Trevor Harris. 5 minutes left. The Elks are down by 4. But they do nothing with that possession. And they end up punting the ball. I thought they should have just hammered it into the end zone to get the rouge. And then there's almost 4 minutes left, 3.5 minutes left, and you're down by 3 instead of 4. I thought that's the way they should have played it, but they didn't.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's part of these, Jerry Jackson as a first-time interim head coach, if maybe it's just not something that he's thinking about. Because, when they got that first early rouge at the beginning of the game, and they got that point, like, we've seen it in the league this year. 1 point can be huge. 1 point can make or break. And for them not to realize that if they would have got a punt single, they could have made it a field goal game instead. It would have been a smart idea. I know you're then giving the Riders field position at the 40, but at that point, the Riders offense wasn't really doing anything, because even after this, the Riders still weren't able to get a first down for the next 2 series. They punted it back, and so it was like at the end of the game, it was like neither offense wanted it. Because
at the end of the at the end of the first half, the offenses are making the plays. But then at the end of the second half of the game, they weren't able to make those plays. There was a moment in the fourth quarter, 3rd and 1, 10 minutes left for the Riders, and it looked like a short one, like inches. And then Corey Mace decided to punt. And I thought, oh, come on. Let's show some killer instinct here. Well, later in the game, 2:48 left, Shea Patterson goes to rush on 2nd and 1. Sean Oakman dummies the Rider O-lineman. And he's in the backfield before he has the ball. And I really think that the Elks defensive tackles, Jamin Pelly and Sean Oakman in this game, they were causing problems for the Riders, and they wanted to avoid the short yardage stuff on 3rd down as to avoid to turn the ball over. And that play late in the fourth quarter displayed it. If they would have got stuffed on that 3rd and 1 earlier in the quarter, that's just another opportunity, I guess, in good field position for the Elks. But the Elks do get the ball back with just under 2 minutes to go, and Curly Gittens fumbles the ball. And that's when the Riders were able to seal it at that point on a play that the Riders had to challenge and get that pass interference to get the first down and eventually kill the clock on that one. But there's a lot going on in this game, and the arguments, I think, are still raging into Sunday evening.
Yeah, it's you hate for a game to be so, I guess, quote unquote controversial like that, but that's one of the reasons what makes the CFL so great and entertaining. It is what it is. The right team, in my opinion, won. But I understand when it's a do or die game and there's slight controversies in there. I can understand that being frustrating. Nice of the Elks to have a nice fireworks celebration for the Riders after the game, though.
They had some really nice fireworks, but a completely different game than when these teams last played in August. The Elks at that time had Trey Ford starting, and they were able to run the ball in this game 30 yards rushing. Leak had 9 carries for 15 yards, and Rankin had 4 for 13. Prukop had another couple on the short yardage, so they could not get the running game going. But McLeod Bethel-Thompson, he threw for 379 yards. Curly Gittens Jr. had 10 catches for 122. Geno Lewis, number 87, had 87 yards and a touchdown. So they were moving the ball that way. And even Trevor Harris, he had 2 picks, but he threw for 358 yards. And the Riders couldn't run the ball that effectively either. 15 carries, 46 yards for Frankie Hickson, but 2 receivers over 100 yards. Keyshawn Johnson, 103 yards and a touchdown, and Sam Emelis, 126 yards and a touchdown. Kean Schaefer-Baker, 3 for 51, including that big 34-yarder that maybe the Elks would have liked to have another look at, but their challenge was taken away, I guess, earlier in the half. With Jarius Jackson trying to challenge something that wasn't challengeable. I bring up Trey Ford intentionally with the way that the Elks were able to run the ball against the Riders earlier in the year. There's now more rumblings about what's going to happen with the quarterbacks in Edmonton. What's going to happen with everything in Edmonton? For a while, it looked like Jarius and G-Roy were going to be the guys to lead the team going into next year. Now I'm not so sure. But I will mention this is, at the Elks games, you can kind of buy a message and wish your wife happy birthday or whatever it was. But Coach Sorrells of the Elks, it was his birthday. It said, "Happy birthday, Coach Sorrells, from your bosses, Jarius and G-Roy," which I thought was pretty funny. And I have to mention this. So at the Elks games, they do the Tim Hortons cup shuffle with the Timbit goes in. All year, you choose between coffee, dark roast, and hot chocolate. It's been dark roast. Well, they had this kid, and he goes Well, all year it's been dark roast, so I'm going dark roast. He calls them out on the big screen. So the Elks have one more opportunity to switch it up and have the last one not be dark roast. But 9 times this season, it's been the same answer all year long, and I love that the kid called him out.
Like, that's ridiculous. Oh my
Well,
God.
when the contest started, everyone in our section, like the Timbit didn't even go in the cup. I'm like, dark roast. And it was dark roast again. So
is it the same? Is it the same ending?
it's like the same
cup?
video.
The video?
Yeah,
They're just that lazy. Wow. My God. We have the Gainer shuffle or whatever, where he goes down the pipes and it's got like the Super Nintendo. I like that one.
That's a cool one.
That's
actually
better than I'm undefeated every game. I've got it right.
Now, there's a new contest that they've started at the Elks games. Ever since Larry Thompson drove through the Stampeders, they have a race with cardboard Elks fire trucks on fans, and they win a Larry Thompson t-shirt.
That's awesome.
They call it Larry's fire truck race, which I love. But that's the game. And do we talk? I mean, is Jarius and G-Roy going to be around? Is Trey or McLeod going to be around? There's now rumblings again. This came up earlier in the season that Trey has been refusing packages, which I actually haven't. We don't know how it's being presented. Like, are they saying, Trey, you're going to go play receiver on this package or whatever? And I think all the power to him for saying, I don't know if I want to do that. But if there are different packages where he is playing quarterback and it's just a short yardage thing, or there is some sort of misdirection in there, that does seem like a poor attitude to have. Just the outside looking in. And I don't think any of us really know what's going on behind the scenes and in these meetings going on, but it almost feels like the two quarterbacks and the coach and GM, there's a new president that they're hoping to announce. I don't know if before the Grey Cup or what they're planning in Edmonton, but it does seem like a new season of wholesale changes on the way.
Yeah, it's tough for me because just the way that Trey's had to kind of deal with the yo-yo of the ups and the downs. You're not starting. You're not a good practice quarterback. You're not, then finally, oh crap, okay, I guess we got to start you. And then you rattle off a bunch of wins and you get fans excited, and then you end the year off on kind of a positive, and then you think you're going to go in to be the starter, and the fans think that too, and then they sign McLeod, Bethel-Thompson, and yeah, it's just you have to be professional when you're a football player in a professional sports. You have to be professional. So if your coach tells you to play, you got to play. I know there's another quarterback who was in Edmonton last year, Kyle Loxley, and he refused to go in on short yardage, and he got cut the next day, and then he was sounding off on Twitter a couple weeks ago saying how he was a better quarterback than other people playing. And of course, people then kind of dunked on him, being like, well, you refused to play. So there's that. So I hope that's not the case for Trey. But, one of the Elks radio guys, Eddie Steele, former player, alumni, he's out there saying that he's heard from 3 coaches that this is true. So if he's willing to put his name out there on this, I guess that where there's smoke, there's fire. And it just does, to me, that doesn't seem like any of those 3 or 4 are going to be back next year. Maybe McLeod. But maybe we see Bo Levi go into Edmonton. Can you imagine?
Because you're holding out for VA going to Saskatchewan, aren't you?
Well,
I think
Bo's
he's
wife
gonna
doesn't
be.
want to play. Bo's wife doesn't want to go to Regina. I think it's twice that he might have had a chance to do that. So,
So what are the
um,
Elks gonna say? Bo, we got a river valley in Edmonton. Come live here.
hey, Bo, Bo's gonna get to actually go play in Calgary for the first time. Is it? I
Can
think
you?
he's still a game.
Okay, so Bo's undefeated on Labor Day. If
Yeah.
Edmonton wants to win on Labor Day,
I'm just saying. But no, I'm just having fun here. But
yeah,
that's something legitimate. Like there's a couple quarterbacks going around. Like you don't know if Trevor's going to resign or if he's going to retire. Vernon's going somewhere. I think Davis Alexander has shown well enough in when he came in for Cody that I think maybe he might get a look somewhere. Calgary's going to need a new quarterback, I think. The quarterback rooms are going to look a lot different next year. And it's kind of a knock right now to me on Trey Ford if he is refusing. Like, I think some teams are going to have to kind of meet with him and be like, hey, what's the situation? And if it does come down to he's been told to be a receiver or something, because I wouldn't put that past Chris Jones at all.
right.
And so, but if it's continuing and because they signed Prukop early. As soon as BC cut him, they signed him, and he's been doing their short yardage. So it doesn't make sense for them to actually still have Prukop, but then also say we want Trey to do short yardage. So it must have to be some sort of other package. But at the same time, that's kind of confusing for your offenses to have, a full 2 quarterback system. So maybe it makes sense to say, hey, we shouldn't be doing that. But I don't know. I could see, maybe Winnipeg take a flyer on Ford and have him sit underneath Zach for the last probably year of his contract next year. You have the Ford brothers playing together. Maybe that could happen. I don't know. But
Well, hey,
I just know
because I don't know when I don't think Streveler is going to be ready for the beginning of next season. But if you had Trey and Strevy on the field at the same time, I mean, and Brady and Dembski in that, I mean, the Bombers will be somebody I wouldn't want to play in 2025. And then I think this is me speaking early. I think after 2025, we see a lot of those vets in Winnipeg start to retire. But I guess that's a bridge we'll cross next year. But a lot of things going to be talked about in Alberta because, neither team going to be in the playoffs. And they're playing each other on Thanksgiving. They're playing each other this weekend. Friday Night Football in Week 19 is the Bombers hosting the Argos. The Stamps are hosting the Elks on Saturday. The Riders hosting the Lions on Saturday. Obviously, a huge game when it comes to wanting to host that Western semifinal. And then the Alouettes are hosting the Red Blacks on Thanksgiving Monday. Obviously, Ottawa's going to want to win that if they want to host the Eastern semifinal. So a lot of things to be figured out with what playoff games are going to be played where. The Ticats still have a shot. But they do need the Argos to lose their last 3 and the Ticats to lose or win their last 2. That is the last position to be decided in the playoffs. And hey, so that this Friday night game, the Bombers are going to want to host the West Final. They're going to want to beat Toronto. Yeah, so we got some good football still to watch the rest of the way. That's Week 18 of the CFL season. I'm Travis Currah. He is Sheldon Jones. Boy, we can talk about just 3 football games, but I'm glad you are here to do it, my friend. We will talk to you soon to get you ready for Week 19.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.